you're not necessarily avoiding failure by learning from it. If there's going to be enough iterations in the future, if that's not going to be a one-time interaction, like for example, I find you once in the street, I don't know you, and let's invent this situation, and I just kill you. I have a gun, I kill you. In that interaction, you will have failed defending, but it's just a one-time interaction. You cannot repeat that interaction. It doesn't matter how much you learn or how much you take out of that situation, because the cost has already happened, and you will not have another opportunity to regain the thing that you've lost, because your life is not non-negotiable. You cannot get it back.
Hello everyone, I'm Patric here, joining with Alex Buxeda on this podcast episode here on what is failure. We will go into the definition of that in a couple of minutes. First of all, we want to introduce ourselves. Alex, why don't you go first?
I'm basically just a random guy who likes studying and reading about different topics. I'm interested in philosophy, finance, economics, evolutionary processes. Yes, so I'm basically just a guy who's got a lot of intellectual curiosity. That's basically all I am.
Yeah, and you also have a podcast, right? Change My Mind.
Oh, yeah.
What is it about?
The ethos of the podcast is strong opinions weakly held. So the thing I'm just trying to focus on is on having an open mind towards complex topics in order to be able to face topics which you might not agree with, in order to be able to see the opponent's side. If you don't have an open mind towards the topic you are discussing, you won't be able to see the nuances in the conversation. And I think that's the best way to go forward. If you are dogmatic, dogmatism is probably the opposite, the diametrically opposed thing to what I'm trying to do with the podcast.
That sounds really interesting. In case you're not familiar with me, if you're listening from Alex's side, I just kind of started also kind of talking about deeper topics, and also I'm generally live streaming about my model photo shootings. I'm a model on the side for over a year now, but I'm also really interested in psychology and just generally living a healthier life mentally and physically. And I'm just trying to give this knowledge I gather in my head out to you. But now on today's episode, we focused on a really, really interesting topic that I actually just randomly picked up when we had an introduction talk to each other. And that question that Alex asked is, what is failure? And I just find it particularly interesting on how you mention it and how you went into it and how you defined it. And if you can, just give me another definition of what failure means to you.
Okay, in my opinion, failure is something that is relative. You cannot, with absolute terms, define what failure is, because if you try to abstract from the world and try to judge things objectively from the outside, you wouldn't really be able to have adjectives to describe anything. So it's always something that is relative to something else. If you've got some kind of a standard that says you should be earning 10,000 euros a year, for example, if you don't achieve that, you're not a success, you're a failure. But if you overpass it and you earn like 20,000 euros in that year, you are being a success. But there must be a standard. You always have a standard when you're doing a project. Every project has a standard. Like, let's say I want to get fit. You've got certainly some kind of standard that if you are getting more fat and less muscle, you are definitely not getting fit. You're not progressing towards the objective. It might be less tangible, the benefit, the thing that is making you progress, because you are not able to tangibly see the changes in your body day to day, but you certainly know the general rules of the system. You know that more muscle and less fat is proper in order, like a good diet. I'm not an expert in any kind of terms in this topic, but I'm just saying that you have to have a standard and you have to have an objective, and the project has a standard and an objective. The standard here is to get the fittest and the healthiest you can, and if the objective is not fulfilled, I would consider that to be a failure. But it's always subjective, and it requires the comparison with an alternative. If the alternative would have been better, I would consider that to be a failure.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So I found this point that you mentioned fascinating. We kind of have a similar understanding on what is failure. You mentioned that when you set yourself an objective and you do not achieve it, this could be considered as a failure, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand this proposal, and I also accept your opinion to the most part. And when my understanding of failure came into place, you also found it really interesting, as I remembered, was that you can set yourself an objective and do not reach it. But the thing is that when you do not learn from this experience why you didn't achieve it, that objective, then you can consider it a failure. So for me, reaching the objective is not the definition of success or failure. It is what you take out of reaching or not reaching the objective. And this goes into many categories of life. And yeah, I just think this is also an aspect from my side. I don't know, have you experienced that as well in life, that you may have not achieved something, but still you felt like you gained a lot from it?
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. It happened to me a lot of times in many different sides of life. But I think if you get something and if you get feedback from the failing of, if you try a project and it fails, you don't get to the standard that you were trying to impose yourself, or that you were trying to fulfill, you're not necessarily avoiding failure by learning from it. If there's going to be enough iterations in the future, if that's not going to be a one-time interaction, like for example, I find you once in the street, I don't know you, and let's invent this situation, and I just kill you. Because I have a gun, I kill you. In that interaction, you will have failed defending. You will have been able to defend. But it's just a one-time interaction. You cannot repeat that interaction. It doesn't matter how much you learn or how much you take out of that situation, because the cost has already happened, and you will not have another opportunity to regain the thing that you've lost, because your life is not non-negotiable. You cannot get it back. So in situations like, for example, personal relationships, you can maybe be less outgoing in the start of your life because you are like a skeptic with other people. I don't know how people are going to react. I'm more of a, I don't know, whatever someone might be in the start of the evolution of the psychological process of a person, you might be less outgoing. And as you interact with more people, you start knowing more. And so the previous interactions that you had might not have been as successful as the ones you might have in the posterior years. Like someone who's 30 knows more how to interact with people than someone who's 20. So I guess that there's some kind of trial and error and some margin to improve there. But if there's an interaction which you don't have margin of learning, for example, in the interaction I just embedded in which I killed you, learning might not be the solution to avoiding failure.
Sure, that is true. That's an interesting aspect. I mean, of course, killing someone if you weren't able to defend yourself is kind of an extreme scenario, but I understand your premise here. And I mean, of course, let's say in, I don't know, relationships with people, let's say with your partner, I mean, the relationship could fail or succeed. I mean, if, let's say you have a relationship and it fails and you will not get back together forever, then you basically have those two options on both sides. You have not succeeded in the part of that you won't be able to gather forever, or you can look at the things that happened in that relationship and learn from it if you get into another one in the future. So I think both of our aspects that we just discussed kind of apply in non-extreme scenarios.
Yeah,
would you agree?
Like, most of them are not that extreme.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, of course, I think that with relationships, not just with a partner, but also with family or friends, any relationship, also at work, have a lot to do with learning and if you succeed or fail in them. And I think we mentioned that as well, that learning from experiences in relationships shape pretty much most of the part of how you will interact and live lives with future relationships, like with future partner, future friends, future workplace, something like that. Yeah, I think this all can be translated to many things in the possible future on what happens on your objective, whatever your objective may be, right?
Yeah, but it depends if you consider to be that relationship the objective in your life, or if the objective in your life is the maximum fulfillment on average or throughout your life, or the maximum amount of fulfillment on absolute terms. If your objective is to have the maximum amount possible of joy, you might not care as much of stopping a relationship, because the thing that you've learned from that previous relationship, you might be able to apply it in order to fulfill yourself or the other person more in a better way in the future. So that's not, this would be like how a machine would think. I wouldn't think like this. If I stop having a relationship with someone I loved, I would be devastated emotionally. But what I'm saying is that objectively, you can take facts and knowledge out of a situation in which you might not have achieved the highest of the standards possible, or the one you were imposing yourself.
Then you're more relating now to personal, what you learn, but also from your career side. Did you refer to that more, or are you still on the relationship-based side now?
Oh, I think that there's a spectrum of how extreme something is. Like, let's say here is the one in which there's like you go and buy some bread, and that's like €3, €2, whatever the cost is. That's almost irrelevant for you. You can repeat that thing almost an infinite amount of times. So if you fail buying a piece of bread that is super bad, you will say, okay, I'm not going to buy this one anymore, so I will just buy another one. That's fine. In this spectrum, in the other side, it would be the one in which I said that was the most extreme possible. This would be the one in which I kill you without you being able to defend yourself. This doesn't have a way of like rehearsing the damage done, and this one absolutely has. The synthesis of the theory is this: that like there's one in which you absolutely don't care about failing, and that the earning of information doesn't cost you anything, because if you fail, the trial and error of the process doesn't require you a lot of resources. But in the other side, doing a trial and error of, let's see if I can defend myself in the street, going to a guy and saying, hey guys, shoot at me, I will try to defend. If you fail, like, that's game over. You cannot repeat that, but you certainly can repeat buying a bad type of piece of bread. So I would say that in this spectrum, depending on how far here you are, you cannot permit yourself to repeat the process. Like, for example, in the banking system, the too big to fail, those will be considered to be too far here in order to permit ourselves to let them fail and then clean the system of bad investments or whatever. Like, for example, a relationship in which you have invested too much. You might not want to admit the error or the cost, because that's too much. You would consider that to not be a cost that is assumable. You will say, I'm not going to assume that cost, so I'm going to keep investing in this thing. So that will be here. And the other side, it's a person you've just met, and you say, oh, if you treat me wrongly, I will just leave and I will have nothing to do with you. So in this spectrum, depending on where it is, you will be more willing to repeat an interaction or to keep investing, depending on how invested you feel you are.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be aware of where you are in that spectrum that you just described, and I think when you're exactly aware of where you are in this spectrum, then you are also a bit more. How should I define it? You're also a bit more comfortable with yourself in taking a risk, trying something, be on a safer side in another place in your life. With taking a risk, I mean, for example, in your career or in a relationship or any place you are in your life. And what I think is great about you describing this scenario is that if you are aware of where you are in this place, you know a bit, you know yourself a bit better than you did before. And I think a lot of that has to do with improving yourself, taking an interest in how or what you could improve about yourself. Refers to this whole self-improvement mindset, right?
I was just going to go to the notes to read a bit, so we could just Like, no, for example, failure depends on the expectations posited on what we're evaluating. So we have to be evaluating something in order to be able to consider something to be a failure or a success.
Yeah, evaluation is a big part of this. I mean, it relates also to your scenario you explained. I mean, let's say you evaluate why you got fired from that job, or why you didn't get accepted from or at this university. You have the option to just let's say be angry at it, or actually evaluate and look at yourself and see what could I have done differently in order to not repeat this failed process in the future. I mean, I think this is one of the biggest parts where people fail to understand that this could improve their lives so much, or stop the repetition of failure in certain areas they can't understand why they cannot proceed in a way.
Yeah, I completely understand you. When you are facing a problem and it's too overwhelming for you, it overwhelms you, you're not able to learn from it. You need to have some kind of rationality in that situation to be able to take information out of the failed process that you just achieved, that you just had. So if you are like super overwhelmed by a situation, you won't be able to say, I actually think that there was one thing here that made the process not be able to be fulfilled or be achieved in a positive way. And then there's another thing that I could have done in order to make it correctly. If you are just too overwhelmed, you will just go into your bed and cry. I'm not saying that we shouldn't feel anything. I'm just saying that if you feel too much, you're not able to learn. And if you feel too little, you don't care about learning. So I think that there's a moderation. There's an amount of, I think there was a philosopher who talked about the amount of the virtues in between the two extremes. I think it was Plato, Aristotle. I don't know. I'm not an expert of ancient philosophers. I'm sorry, but the thing is that you have to be in this new spectrum of how much you feel. You have to be in the middle, more or less. If you are too much to one side, you won't be able to learn, or you won't care about learning. So in order to learn at the maximum rate possible and to achieve your objectives in the maximum possible way, you have to get a balance between too much feeling and too little, I guess.
Were you ever on a particular side, too much feeling or too little, in a part of your life where you really lost control and let your feelings completely overwhelm you, and you weren't able to control the situation and actually evaluate what was happening or why you didn't succeed? Did that ever happen to you?
Yeah, definitely. For example, when I was 13 years old, I was in the school. I guess I was going to school, and I failed. I failed the year. I failed too much classes. There's many reasons why I failed, but the basic point is that in that moment, too many emotions were going through my head. In order for me to say, I failed this, there might be some reason here. I haven't studied hard enough. I didn't care enough about this. The teachers and me might not have developed a deep enough relationship in order for them to understand my situation. So I was overwhelmed by the situation, and I wasn't able to see what the error was. So I wasn't able to learn as fast, and maybe on the next year I might have had a better situation in case I was able to learn faster. But now in retrospect, I'm able to learn of previous failures, because now I'm calmed and free of those stress. I'm able to look at that situation objectively and say, okay, the thing that was not working there was that I was too stressed. Maybe I was too focused on other things that wasn't about learning. I might have played too much video games. I might have watched too much TV. I don't know. There's many things that could have taken time out of me, so I wasn't investing in learning. And so I failed the year. I had to repeat it. And I think that's the biggest situation of my life I had until now, in which I was overwhelmed by my emotions. What about you? Did you have something like this?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the most extreme examples would be one of my first relationships I had with a partner. Of course, in a relationship, often emotions are the main part, but the thing still was you still have to, you have to be aware of how much you can let your emotions go and guide you, and how much you should just be thinking logically and thinking to yourself, how do I really manage this situation? How do I express my feelings? And in my opinion, it basically ended because the expression of emotions or feelings was on an extreme level. So basically, the emotions or feelings that got expressed were not logical, well thought through. So basically that gave this harsh knuckling on each other, which in the end led to, definition of failure. In my relationship now, I'm aware of the things that happened there, of my mistakes, the general mistakes that happened there, and also how I felt after those particular things happened, which gave me the opportunity to actually think about those situations and experiences, which I'm now able to handle in a better way. I'm still learning, I think, in relationships, and like when much emotion is involved, you can always learn how to handle. You can evaluate situations after situations. It's hard to not overthink, actually. A big part of relationships as well. I think that goes for many people, but that's probably my biggest experience from all of this, where my emotions, my feelings were not well thought through and just put out there without any thought behind it.
Yeah, there was a lack of wisdom or maturity in order to be able to face the situation appropriately.
That's exactly how it was. And this just, especially at a young age, I think this happens more often in many relationships. And there's just, two sides that are not very well experienced, especially if it's the first relationship for each other. In most cases around the world, not just now in my case, you're overwhelmed on how you should react to this situation. And in most cases, you just overreact. You express your emotions too much without any thought behind it. I think it is rather rare to have the case where you're actually thinking everything through and going at it in a very logical way. I think especially at a young age.
Yeah.
And also not only let's say in relationships, but also let's say at school. If you are bad at school, let's say, just make an extreme, and you always have bad grades, but you fail to see that maybe you never study, or you always study too late, or your study strategy is wrong. You don't see that at a very young age when you're, for example, in high school. Your mind did not or wasn't able to process this or learn this ability to evaluate and see what can I do better. I think that comes with age, or comes with realizing that life is mostly determined by your actions and what you change and how you act in life.
So you are assuming that there's agency, there's capability on our side to modify our environment. You are not out of good expectations. You are capable to modifying your environment in a positive way. So if that's the case, I think you've got a moral duty to do it.
Absolutely. I read a book, I think we talked about it as well, Atomic Habits. He mentioned that shaping your environment is a key to forming new habits. That's something else, but you are able to shape or build your environment in a way that it affects your desired objective positively. So let's say you want to have good grades. In order to get good grades, you have to shape your environment in that way. So put your TV away, or put your TV, or make it harder to access your TV, or not going out every night and telling your friends, I can't do tonight, I have to do it tonight, I have to study. You are absolutely able to shape your environment to have a positive impact on your life, especially your goals or your objectives. I think it is hard. I think it's really hard to realize how, or to see how you can shape that environment. I think, do you have that as well, that sometimes you know you're doing something wrong? Let's say, I know I'm not good at this subject. I know I'm not good at it, but I'm just not able to see what I can change at the moment.
Yeah, I think that we're condemned to deal with that situation perpetually. Because if you are in a situation, situations are relative. You can be in a situation that is much better than the situation of someone else that might be homeless or have a super bad situation, have the violence with family. Like, I don't know, there's many super bad things going on in the world. So someone who might be in a worse situation than you are doesn't know what to do in order to improve his life. Because if he knew, he would already have done that thing. So by definition, everyone that is in a situation, no matter if you are here or here or here, if the market already knew something that was going on, it would already be discounted if the market was rational, which it doesn't necessarily need to be. But the thing is that if you already knew how to go up, you already have applied the thing you need to apply in order to go up. You are as up as you can. So in order to improve something in your life substantially, you need new information. And I think that the best way to do this is to be able to improve your capability of analyzing who's better in life than you in whatever thing. It doesn't matter really the thing you might be focusing on to analyze this. If you've got someone else who's built a super successful company, he might not be representative of what the essence of what building a successful company might be, but he might be able to tell you the general rules by which you might be able to, more often than not, have a positive trend, you know? So if you haven't been able to do it, learning from someone who has empirically shown that he's been successful might be a better idea than trying to learn from people who haven't shown that empirically.
That is true. But I think it's also important to remember that you can't compare too much. I think that's also something that can drag you down in a way.
Really? Why?
Well, you see, I can give you an example with in fitness. I think it's the most easy one. When you go to the gym, let's say, when you follow social media channels online to learn from somebody, and you are on a fitness journey as well, you will find yourself in many encounters, let's say in the gym or seeing people online, which have more strength, which have better balance, which have a lower body fat percentage, you name it, better shape, it can be anything. Your mind automatically compares or tries to compare, like, oh, his shape is better than mine. This can happen in your brain, and it is difficult and important to see that when you follow a fitness influencing person, let's say online, which is today standard in most cases, then you have to watch out to not compare too much and get jealous or feel dragged down because you feel like you're not as good as this person, and stay on the logical side and actually want to learn from this person. Or when you go to the gym and let's say you have someone who's at a similar age, and you always see that guy in the gym, and or the girl, it doesn't matter, then you will find yourself, maybe it could happen, comparing to him if he has a better shape, let's say, or can weigh more. This, you will notice that, and your brain will tell you, oh God, why am I not as strong as him or as her? And you have to kind of being able to split this, and when you're going to follow an objective and taking inspiration from some place else, being rational and not compare yourself too much on a unlogical way that is just making it a unrealistic competition. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but then here, when you're comparing yourself to someone who might be farther in the betterment of whatever standard you're using to compare yourself with, there's another spectrum here. I'm sorry for exposing so many spectrum.
That's great.
In which you can be more or less mature. If you're super immature, you will have a high amount of envy. The less mature you are, the more envy you will have. And the more mature you are, the more objective facts, cold facts you can apply to your life without actually feeling insecure about yourself. It's just, this guy is just randomly, or maybe he's worked more, or maybe he's just have better genetics, or maybe there must be some reason why he's a better shape. He's got a better shape than me. So let's see what that thing is, because I'm certainly interested in improving my shape. So in order to do that, the best way to do that is to analyze things objectively. Well, how is it that it's a sweet casualty that the objective system recommends you to analyze things objectively? But if you analyze how the other person got to the situation they are at objectively, and you think of what the pieces of the system have been in order to build that thing, you are more capable to upgrade or improve than if you were just envious and saying, oh, that guy got luck. It's not because of him. It's just that he got luck and I'm super unlucky. I'm the most unlucky person, and still I've got a relatively good shape. So that comparison will be the most toxic possible. And the same thing happens in personal relationships with a partner, family, friends, business, fitness. Like, it applies to everything. So if you're able to get away of your personal situation and analyze things objectively from the outside, like if you were like in a third party, like
yes, exactly.
That's something I've been improving through the last few years, and I think I still have a lot to improve in, but I think that's the key into being able to analyze what's the thing that you are missing in order to improve that next step that you really want.
Yeah, that's that point from viewing that situation from an outside perspective is one that I had in my head just before, because I think this is one of the best ways to actually analyze a situation where you are not comfortable in. I think that defines it really good. If you're in a situation where you're not comfortable with, try to see it as an outside person from a third point of view. Analyze the situation. What is happening? What can I change? Why did that happen? In order to actually find a solution. Because if you stay in yourself and if you always are in your head and trying to find your solution that only fits you and is just because I want it like that and it's unfair, this won't elevate you to a new height. As you said, in order to improve in a situation, you have to gather new information or being able to be analyzing this point of the situation. And this can only happen by really seeing it, analyzing it, and finding that solution that isn't an immature, selfish reason, because this will only drag you down even further. I think that also refers to the relationship side that we mentioned before, and also your explanation of this spectrum from letting your emotions guide you or actually finding facts to get forward in a relationship. Let's say if you are just thinking about yourself, relationship with partner, at work or in family, it doesn't matter, then the other party will also kind of do that, or is mature enough to notice it and leave you. This all comes together. This is all a big pact of, are you able to accept the fact that you need to analyze and be rational, logical, or fail in this situation and being immature, selfish, unrational? I mean, you name it. I think this all defines it, right?
Yeah, and I think that there's some kind of resistance or friction towards improving, because if you, an 8 out of 10, let's say, in maturity, which not many people are, but let's just make a random...
You can't put a number on it, but I guess what you're saying, you're trying to give a visualization. It
could be 4 or 3. The number itself doesn't matter. Let's say 5, because it's in the middle. If you are 5, people who are on the 8 will not want to be with you, and people who are on 3 will think that you are boring because you are more into, like, I don't know, reading, taking care of yourself than partying in comparison to them. You might still party a bit, but people who get more mature tend to party less and do more long-term productive stuff. So the more productive you are, or the more mature you get, the more mature people you will be attractive to, and the less mature people will be attractive to you, and the less they will be attracted to you. So the thing is that you are like, whenever you are on 5 and from 10 to 5, you are condemned to stay with people like that are 6, 4, 5, more or less. You're really not going to be able to interact with someone who's an 8 in a personal relationship. You might be able to find a mentor in order to teach you, or read a book by someone who was on an 8. But I think that's the best way to improve, to either find a mentor or someone who teaches you and helps you out, or reading from someone who's already left that knowledge out for people to know.
Yeah, that's true. I think there is a third point. To be honest, absolutely honest, I'm not sure if this is from gathering information to know this third option, but I feel like it could also be just your personal evolving maturity is to learn from your own experiences, which I like to talk about. You said that getting a mentor, learning from someone, or learning, I think learning from yourself is a third option that is sometimes, or should only be an option if you really know that you are the kind of person that can do that. If you're not, there's no shame in getting a mentor or learning from a person.
But I think that your capability to learn from your own mistakes will determine how much you will be able to learn from a mentor. I think that there's a huge correlation on how much you are able to extract from an interaction with a mentor, and how much you are able to extract from your own situation. It might be true that you are stuck in a situation in which you are not able to get as much information, and you might be able to get a huge amount from a mentor. In general rules, someone who's really not interested in self-improvement and who's stuck on a level, but not because he doesn't want to improve, he doesn't have the will to do it, he won't be able to get a lot of value out of a mentor who's a few steps farther. So I think that there's a correlation. People who improve a lot in one system, they will be able to improve a lot in the other systems, be it by learning by themselves or by experiencing.
That's a really good point. That if you are capable of getting around or improving from a system, you can do that in another. You may have to adapt yourself. You may have to adapt a bit. I know that I think I am actually okay with learning from myself. I know that in certain areas I'm not that good, and learning from someone is easier for me in situations where I'm not able to learn from myself, and it is harder to learn from someone when I'm already good at learning from myself. So you have to be somewhat aware of what you're good at in those situations, how you handle this. You just have to look at yourself again, take some experiences that you're not really comfortable with, let's say situations, and then analyze, did I learn from those experiences, and how did I do that? How did that affect my life till this time now? This is also for me an important aspect to consider. I don't know, how do you feel like about yourself? Do you learn about, or just improve yourself from yourself, or more from others, or reading, or any other source?
I think that most of the knowledge I have hasn't been gathered by my personal experiences. But I think this applies to everyone. Like, in order to be able to have a wireless mouse, I haven't developed that technology. I know nothing about the building of this thing. I wouldn't be able to do it. It hasn't been through my trial and error that I have been able to invent it. It was just me saving out a little bit of money, buying it, and then I have it. So that was a quick way of doing it. So it was someone else who did it and put the information somewhere, and so other person was able to build it and earn money by doing it. So I think that most of the knowledge that I have wasn't from myself, trial and error. There might be some, But most of it, I would say like 70% is symbolic. It might be more, it might be less, but that's my personal feeling. I feel like most of the knowledge is just gathered through the trial and error of other people who lived in the past or that are living now, but you are not actually... I don't have enough resources to do the trial and error through all the things that I'm experiencing right now. Like, I don't have resources to build a Tesla and do trial and error with engineers in order to build a car and then have a super cool car, the Model S. I wouldn't be able to do the research project, but I might be able to buy the $80,000 version of the Model S, you know?
You're more likely to actually in the future be able to buy this car than actually inventing or creating this car. Yeah, I understand that. That's a really good point you mentioned. For me, it'd be, as you said, you don't have time to actually go at everything you desire and say, I'm going to try and fail at this as long as I actually do it, achieve it, or that would be completely out of ratio. I mean, if you would do that, you would achieve nothing in your life. That's a bit too extreme, but I mean, you would be missing out on so many other things that would actually improve your life, that may achieve the similar thing. I mean, you don't have to create a Tesla. If you buy it, those are two kind of different things. If you want to create a car, that's a point. You can gather information, like you said earlier, but it's not necessary to create a Tesla again. It would fail. I mean,
yeah, my objective here is to experience how comfortable and how technologically advanced the car is. I want to experience that thing because I value it. I don't feel as drive to doing the technological advancement in engineering terms to add value to society with the Model S. Or I might be driven by it, but I know that I'm not capable to do it, so I just abstain from doing it because I would be a failure doing that.
I mean, that's logical. I mean, that's logical thinking. You're aware of this, and you adapt in this situation, which is important. Learning from those or accepting those terms gives you kind of an idea of where you want to go in life, what you're inspired by, and what your objectives in life are. I mean, if let's say let's stay on the example with the Tesla. If you accept the fact that you cannot make a Tesla, which is, I mean, you can say to yourself, well, if I want a Tesla, I can make the goal to achieve it, or make my own electric car. Now, how do I approach those situations? Each of them are a big objective. Earning $80,000 is a big thing, but also creating an electric car company is a big thing. Now, what objective you set yourself is completely up to you in the end. I mean, for me, it's fine to have big goals. For me, the bigger goal definitely would be creating an electric car company, right? Sensing this rationality is really important in other aspects in your life, on how you handle situations. Now, also in other parts of life, let's say in an argument, in a relationship, or at work, if you're able to compare how much weight does or is on each side, on what the impact is on a positive and negative side, then you're more or less likely to succeed in getting out of this argument in
depends on how able are you to extract the value out of this failure, of the previous failure. But what you were saying about the building of the company being more valuable in absolute terms, certainly, but the value added per person doesn't need to be bigger than when buying a car. When you are buying a car, you have to be the one putting the $80,000. You might not need to be if you share it, but companies are generally more shared than cars. So to buy the Tesla, you need to earn the $80,000. But to build Tesla, you don't need to add value to the company in the same terms. You might be capable to manage it, so you might add a lot of value by that way, but you might be able to just manage a super small piece. So you add, like, let's say $70,000, and there's a million people working in the company, so each one of them adds $70,000, and the company ends up being, I don't know what's the market capitalization of Tesla right now. I think it's ridiculous, but it's like $400 billion. I don't know, it's ridiculous. I like Tesla.
Yeah, me too. Speaking of like wanting things, the thought of like you actually wanting a Tesla or creating a Tesla, let's say, leads to this status topic that we had in mind, right? Like, for example, wanting to buy a Tesla or owning a Tesla and, let's say, presenting it gives you some sort of status. Now, another way of status would be actually creating an electric car company or creating a Tesla, let's say, and providing this value, this car, to society to be able to buy and use this car, which gives different kinds of status, obviously, in rational terms.
Oh yeah. Oh, by the way, I just checked the market capitalization of Tesla, and it's $1.1 trillion. So it's like,
my God.
It's like twice or almost 3 times what I said. But
wow, insane.
So yeah, going back to the thing you were saying, status is like the coin of exchange you have with society. When you signal that you are higher than average on something that society values, there's really nothing you can earn from being higher than average on killing babies. I've killed 3 babies this month. I'm higher than average. The average person probably kills like 0.001 babies a month. And I've killed 3. I'm higher than average. I've got a status. No, you actually have negative status because that's something negative for society. So if you are higher than average on society in something that society values and something that is positive, you will have positive status. But you can do something which is bad for society and people will hate you. And sometimes with arguably correctly, they will hate you. For example, the babies.
Ironically enough, having, let's say, negative status by doing something really bad also gives you a status. It's horrible, but still, it kind of does. And I think this is kind of a ironic thing, but I mean, this is how it is. And I think, of course, the goal should be to have a positive status in your life. I think this is also really personal. What you think is positive status also is your own definition of do I succeed in getting status or do I fail in getting status? That are your own terms, how you define that. I mean, you mentioned a very horrifying example for society in general. Killing 3 babies is a negative status and can be considered as failing in society. Of course, succeeding in having status in a society by, let's say, creating an electric car company can be considered as positive status. But do you think there's a thing like just on a positive status, like making a big impact or a small impact, nothing negative, just in this really contributing to anything in life and contributing to one big thing in life? Do you think there's any failing in receiving status or having status?
What do you mean by failing?
Let's say you start to work, you graduated and you start to work as, you name any job, on construction, let's say, and you work your whole life, 40, 50 years on construction without improving anything or educating yourself to, let's say, an architect and make a big building. You just work yourself for 50 years. And after those 50 years, your career is over. You did not make any impact on your career, you just earned money. Now, do you think he has failed in getting status, or do you think he just lived a regular life that he was fine with living on those terms? Or do you think that he has actually failed in getting status? I know this could be kind of controversial.
Well, depends on what's the community you are surrounded by. If the people around you value as the highest possible thing to just stay on the same job as when you were 18 until you are 65, that's something that could give you a lot of status. But in order to, like, let's try making a measuring system that's objective and it's generalized all across the whole West. I guess that in the West, if you don't invest in yourself and don't improve your human capital all through 50 years, you will still be adding value to society, because that person might be earning like $50K a year, but or whatever the amount it is. I don't necessarily care about the quantity. I think that if you're not increasing your human capital, the amount you will earn will not increase. So that amount that has increased is the constant amount of value you've been adding to society. I get the thing I get paid in euros, for example, is the same thing, the same amount of value that I add to society. If I sell if I'm able to produce a Model S, society values it as $80,000. So I get $80,000 in exchange. So I guess that person who's been working for 50 years for $50,000 a year might not feel like he didn't get status if he considers that he's still being able to add $50,000 of value to society through 50 years, which is quite a big amount of money. But depends on what your definition of what the objective is. If your objective is to keep constant progression through all your life, like I think that the general values in the West say, you might consider that person to be low status.
In a way, it is all relative to your surrounded, like in which society you live in, also in which like where you're based. Let's say the United States might value that differently than you name any country.
Zimbabwe.
What?
Zimbabwe, for example. Like people in Zimbabwe might like something completely different than people in the US. So you might want to do something really different in order to achieve status in Zimbabwe in comparison to the US.
Yeah, I think this construct is getting less and less standardized. You see more and more those options to make, let's say, a living online, making a contribution to society, adding value. You see it more and more to be able to do that in your interests. I think it gets a bit harder to define or decide what you actually want, how you want to contribute to society or world in general. I think this is a very personal question. I think, how do you want to contribute, or what do you want to provide in your life? Do you want to provide something big? Do you have big objectives, big goals to actually make a big contribution, or I'm just getting through there, I'm fine with this, and I let others make those contributions? I think this is a personal question that you subconsciously just ask yourself constantly, like, what is my next career step, and should I go to that education, or should I do this education, like this course, or should I switch my job, start a business? Those are all questions that are like contributing to this part of providing value or deciding on a career level, let's say.
Yeah, I agree. You've got to add value to society in order to achieve status. If you're not adding value to society and you're just a rock there, staying without moving, you by not adding value to society is indifferent towards you, as long as you don't like commit any lesserment of value that society has. So you might be less relevant in society the less value you netly add to it, and you might have zero status, which might be you being irrelevant in society. But I think that status is something that we're biologically wired to seeking. Because evolutionarily, you felt like if you were high in the hierarchy of your community or your tribe, you were more capable to access resources, or better mates, better food, more food, better supply of food, water, hygiene, whatever you might consider to be valuable. people high in the ranks, high in the hierarchy, were more able to survive, and that's really the thing I think is driving people to seek status. The feeling, the incapability of our mental wiring to adapt to our new surroundings. There's a lack there. There's a lack in the adaptation of our biological hardware to how we've been able to modify our environment due to collaboration and free markets. So we are still trying to seek status as it is something super relevant for our survival, but it really isn't. If I just went to Hawaii or like to a random place in a remote island, I could go there and live there forever for like 300 euros a year. I could go there, live peacefully, relatively peacefully, but I wouldn't have such a comfortable life as I do now, but I could do that, and I would be considered to be low status, but I would still satisfy my biological needs of surviving. I would still be able to survive, and I guess that with 50 euros a year, I would still be able to do it too, because the GDP per capita from the 1500s, I don't know what it was, but it was lower than 100 euros a year for sure. So what I'm saying is that we are not adapted to our new surroundings. Our evolution goes slower than we've been able to evolve our surroundings. So that makes evolution goes this way and our environments go this way. There's been a mismatch, and this mismatch, the bigger this gap is, the bigger our inefficiencies are. We are genetically predisposed to like fat, sugar, I don't know, sex in big quantities, addictions to certain drugs. Why are those biases so prominent in the West or among humans in general? Because our environments haven't evolved at the same rate as our body evolutionarily, as our brains basically. So that thing is leading to inefficiencies, and one of them is our predisposition to go into biases because we're not able to detect, I'm just trying to maybe be stronger than this guy because my biological wiring tells me that I should be able to be stronger than people around me, because if I'm not, I might get less food today, but that's not true. You're going to go to your house and you're going to eat as much as you want. So there's not really that need, not that actual need to seek for status, but we still feel it. We still have that drive that says, you motherfucker have to seek for status as it is the most important thing. And I think that partially that's what's driving technological progress, because if you weren't interested in impressing people, I think that less technological progress would happen.
Yeah, I think a big part of the success we see on different, let's say, companies, let's say Apple, Tesla, the company, you name it. The reason why it's already on this level is because the people that are behind it are so driven, so their mind is so electrified with seeking status, is driven by achieving the next thing, by feeling like I have to do this in order to survive, let's say from this absolutely basic standpoint, that we are actually we are on complete overdrive, or those, like, I think, yeah, we are absolutely living in an overdrive environment, I feel like, because you said it, our environment, it is so advanced, and we humans are driven by such our basic functions, like trying to provide value in order to survive, which is absolutely not the case in today's world, how we live our lives today. I mean, we both, and a very large amount of people in this world, do not have to provide instant value, create a big contribution right now, and fight for surviving on this day right now. I mean, if we would be on this path right now, our world would look completely different. But at the moment, the absolute trend, I feel like, is everyone is trying to make our life easier. I mean, so many apps, phones, foods, everything are getting designed much more user-friendly. So let's say this yogurt you buy automatically has less calories. Your phone is automatically checking or managing your notifications. It's all making it easier.
Convenient.
Convenient, yes, convenient. Yeah, it just, the urge to survive is getting less and less necessary in a way.
Less of
but
a,
still,
it's still 100% necessary. If you didn't drink water, you'll die, and that will be the end of the project. You can do it. So it's still as necessary as always, but I think it's less of a priority.
urgent.
Urgent.
Less
maybe.
urgent. Yeah. Or less of a priority. I mean, with the example you mentioned of drinking water, I mean, I could not drink a single drop of water today because I know that I have access to water immediately at the very next second if I wanted to. Let's say 3,000-4,000 years ago, I don't know how many years back, if you'd always seek for the next water resource, you'd always find the next meal and have this urge to getting to the next point, or finding a mate in order to get evolution forward. Like, it is so wired in our brains, and the environment we live in is completely making it easier for us, but we don't realize it as much, or we are adapting at the moment.
I've got a friend called Eric, and I talked about how we still have, I call this the post-war mentality. It's nothing related to war. It's just that people after a war have gone super bad, economically non-prosperous situation, and so they still have the mentality of saving, of like being resource savvy. I don't know, there's a kind of mentality which says that you should be more wary of how things are going. So I think that we still have a kind of post-war mentality that was developed not in war, but in our super poor environment that was 50 years ago, for example, or 100 years ago, or even more, 500 years ago. So the farther you get backwards, the poorer people are in general. So our mentality or genetic predispositions have been developed in those super poor ages. So we still have that mindset of, I'm not used to dealing with so many resources, so I might want to guarantee my feeding. I think that's why many guys and girls are so obsessed with sex or with instant gratification in certain ways, like
material things,
for example, or eating bad food. Your genetic predisposition towards wanting to go into the Domino's pizza instead of eating a salad is because the bigger amount of fat there signals your brain that that's more nutritious. It's getting you more nutrients. But you actually don't need those nutrients. You have more than plenty. You've been biologically built in order to maximize the amount of input of nutrients you can get whenever you have the opportunity to. And that thing is leading to a huge inefficiency because we now have an basically infinite amount of resources in our surroundings in comparison to what we used to need previously, or what we need right now actually, because what's the amount of calories you need a day? 5,000 if we're optimist? 5,000 calories, that's super cheap. You can get that for cheap. The amount of food you eat a day, that's super cheap. Why do we still have that predisposition towards eating something which is full of sugar and fat? Inefficiency of evolutionary process. So that's what I call the post-war mindset. This is kind of a joke I have with a friend, but that's the post-war mindset. Basically says that you are used to being in a surroundings that hasn't got as many resources, and once you get into a surroundings that has those resources, you are still acting as if you were poor.
Yeah, I mean, in conclusion to that, basically today's market actually takes advantage of our evolutionary slowness. Let's let's say Domino's, McDonald's, Burger King, they know that the food is bad. Everyone is aware of that. If someone would say that this food is good for us, they're, oh God, please. But
the business isn't satisfying the biological predisposition.
Yeah, they know that we are satisfied with that. Our human body tends to reach to instant gratification more, and they absolutely take advantage of it, and it just creates this huge opportunity for them, and they are using it. I mean, good for them, obviously.
Bad for everyone.
Yeah, sure. If you want to live a healthy life now relating to eating food that you not need in short term or long term, sorry, how do you not program, but yeah, how do you program your brain to set yourself not for instant gratification?
I think the book Atomic Habits, they talked about eliminating from your surroundings the things that you objectively and rationally can think that you don't want them there, or make it harder to get access to it, and make it easier to get access to the things you want. Like, let's say the Kindle. I've got my Kindle just near me, and where do I have? I don't know. I'm not a particularly vicious person, but in case I smoked, I would want to have my cigarette packet super far and hide it somewhere. I might even not buy it consciously, because I would oblige myself to go buy it in case I wanted to smoke. So I think using this kind of technique of modifying your environment when you are rational to force your irrational state to deal with a more optimal situation and to have a better outcome, and discipline. I think Jocko Willink, do you know the ex-Navy SEAL? He's relatively famous. He did a book called Discipline Equals Freedom. And I think that the more discipline you have, the more capable you are of dealing with the thrills of a drug, or like with something you know that is objectively bad, but that you want it because you are genetically predisposed to do it. The more you build that muscle of resisting the thrill for the thing you know is bad, the less biases you will have in the long term, and the more you will be capable to do the good things. So if you join these two strategies, the building of the discipline by exposing yourself to uncomfortable situations in which you basically, you go through a McDonald's, or like maybe exposing yourself to a bad situation, it's not the optimal thing, but basically whenever you are exposed to a bad situation, just deal with it with force, with brute force, mental brute force, not physical. You basically say, I'm not going to eat this thing because I know that it's negative for me. I'm just going to deal with it. I'm going to build the resistance towards it. And let's say you want to read a book. So just take the Kindle, the book, the tablet, or whatever you read on, and start reading. And when you feel the restraint of your brain saying, don't read more because I'm feeling bored now, just keep reading and build a muscle. I'm not saying that you should absolutely alliterate. I think there's a limit in which you shouldn't go farther, but the philosophy of Jocko Willink, I think it's correlated with another book I read called Dopamine Nation. And it talked about how the biases are created and how satisfying yourself in the short term with things that give you dopamine ends up setting the balance of dopamine in the other side. Like your body wants to have something that is called homeostasis. That's the leveling of hedonism, or how much satisfaction you've got. So if you tilt the balance towards one side, you will have your body pushing in the other direction. So whenever this thing doesn't appear, like let's say I consume heroin, I tilt the balance super far in one direction, but whenever I stop consuming it, my body will have already built some kind of resistance towards the other side. So whenever the impulse in this side disappears, the balance will be this way. So I will be super bad. I will feel super bad with myself. I will want a bigger dose of heroin in order to balance that. So the thing I'm saying is that by having discipline, you are capable of dealing with uncomfortable situations with the balance slightly tilted to the other side, in order to be able to deal with things that you objectively think that are correct, but that they give you insatisfaction in the short term. If you add those two systems, I think that you will have a high odds of improving your habits.
I mean, I agree on this point, absolutely. I think it is also mentioned in Atomic Habits that you don't have, he didn't mention that, but you don't have to necessarily like force yourself to just take a book and sit down and read. There are ways to make it easy or nearly automatic to do it systematically by, let's say, placing your book on your bed.
Yeah.
The choice of you actually reading will be more likely to do so or actually take action than if you just, let's say, have a tablet on your bed. So by shaping your environment like this and setting yourself, for example, a goal. So let's say you place your book on the bed and you tell yourself, I'm going to read 3 pages today. It's not much, but if you do it every day, this single task, automatically you get used to it. There's less and less resistance over time. And by having less resistance, you're open for more resistance. So you're more capable of reading 6 pages than 3 pages. But 6 pages might seem much in the beginning. But once you narrow this resistance down, you're more able to achieve this goal of reading 6 pages. Other parts of your life can be constructed like this as well. You don't have to work out every day. This is an absolutely unrealistic goal. Not many people will or can do overtime, which leads to long-term results than just short-term. By doing, let's make an extreme one, by doing 1 push-up every day is the slowest part of actually going to the gym 4 times a week, 45 minutes. Those are huge extremes. But building discipline is by eliminating resistance over time. You have to kind of know yourself, be aware of how you deal with this barrier of resistance. I mean, I know that in certain areas, especially in things I don't like doing, my resistance is higher. I think that's the same for many people. If they don't like it, they have more resistance, right? And you have to go at those tasks more systematically. Of course, doing things you like has less resistance. So that's why going to McDonald's has less resistance, because they make it as easy as possible. You can walk in there, order it, and you have it in an amount of like 3 minutes, let's say, and you only paid $3, let's say.
Yeah.
Compared to actually, let's say, cooking or buying a healthy meal, which may take more time, especially in cooking, and may also have a higher cost, let's say $10. Might not look good in the situation right now, in this short-term situation, but long-term, let's say in 20 years, your body will be looking and acting completely differently when you compare two bodies having a healthy meal every day and a unhealthy meal every day. It makes a huge difference, and it's how you approach those short-term satisfaction scenarios and how you deal with them and are aware of how they affect you in the long term. That's also really important in living a healthier life. Or succeeding in certain areas. I mean, for me, succeeding is, let's say, having a healthy body in 30 years, being able to still walk, run, doing certain tasks. I consider that successful. Obviously, there are other factors, like, for example, a car crash could eliminate this factor. I mean, those are external factors that I can't control, but it's those factors that I control that allow me to set a certain objective that I know I want to achieve in the future.
I absolutely agree. In order to achieve success or to avoid failure, I think that you have to move. Not physically, well, physically also, but I mean... you have to move metaphorically. You have to move from place A to place B. Place B, the process is what gives you the success. So the speed at which you move through the space is the discipline. The more you are capable to do the things that are hard and that are going to add value to your life is directly correlated with how much discipline you have. And the increase at the speed at which you move is the increase of your discipline. And where you are, you might be in a better position than someone else, is how well you've managed your life in the past. You might have a lucky situation, like your parents might treat you correctly, they might love you, you might have a plate of food every day, so you are lucky in that situation. So if you've got a loving family and a plate of food, you could be considered to be a relatively lucky guy. So once you've got that, you are in a good situation, but everything can be taken from you in one day. People are not immortal. They can die. You can die. I can die. Everyone can die. So you can be taking suddenly everything out of you. But with things you cannot control, I think that the best thing, the wisest thing we can do is assume that we are on the average. In the Gauss distribution, I think that is assuming that you are exactly on the middle. Maybe you are not, but assuming that you are exactly on the middle to do the things that are statistically more positive for you, like eating a pizza is negative statistically, and eating an apple is positive for you statistically. If the average person ate an apple, it's better from him on average than if he ate a pizza. So let's do the things that are statistically better for you. And how do you do those hard things that are statistically probable to add value to your life? by building discipline. I think that the discipline can be built with time, but you need exposure to hard things. You have to build the muscle. Like, without stress, you cannot build muscle. So without mental stress, you cannot build discipline, I guess.
Yeah, it's not physically a muscle, but you can just name it a muscle, because in order to, let's say, build your biceps, you need to train it. And the more you train it, or the better you train it, the bigger it gets in most times. And the same is with discipline. And then the rest is how you, or what you want to do in life. I mean, at some point in your life, you will get confronted with a situation where, after you've been in this situation, you will realize that in order to achieve this, I need to do that. And those are the steps that need to be taken. And the discipline allows you to do those steps to get from point A to point B. And if you are not realizing this, if you're not capable of realizing that you need to do or get disciplined or to adapt and try to improve yourself in any way throughout your life, then it sounds so harsh to say that you will fail in life, but you're definitely you're below average of what is considered in today's society as a healthy, good, happy life. I would say is a rational thing to express, right?
Yeah. In order to describe something as a failure, I think that the term of repentance is super correlated with this. I would consider something failure whenever it has some kind of repentance. Mm-hmm. Whenever the expectations haven't been fulfilled as they should have. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that repentance can rationally exist. Because let's say, if you were a machine, economists usually think about it this way. They say, why aren't you going to eat a pizza if it adds more value to you? If you prefer the pizza and you are taking into account the cost and the benefits, and you consider the pizza to add more value to your life, just eat the pizza. It's going to add value to your life. So if that's the thing that in case we were super rational, repentance wouldn't be able to exist. But we're not. And the way some economists look at the society and they say, we just eat the pizza if you feel like it, if you've taken into account all the costs and the benefits. It's not the proper way of managing this, because there's a misalignment between what the environment is and what our genetic predispositions are. So whenever that closes and disappears, be it by sustaining this environment through the next 10 million years, or by CRISPR, by modifying our genes in order to align how our environment is to what our genetics is. Until that happens, I don't think it is rational to say that if you like pizza, just eat it. I think that we should take into account that we tend to want irrational things because we are predisposed to it. So we have to deal with it. So there's space for repentance. I want to do a future episode for my podcast about the existence of repentance. And I will make a case that maybe it rationally shouldn't exist, but because of us not being able to be 100% rational, there's still space for repentance. I want to, lose 10 kilos of fat, let's say. So I want to lose fat. And if I didn't lose it, I'll consider that to be a failure. I'm repenting myself for not having done the thing I was expecting to do. The more repentance you have, the more failure you are. In order to get repentance, you have to have failed in something. You cannot fail in something and not get repentance. With whatever is the moral standard we're using in order to judge something as more valuable, if you haven't achieved whatever was expected from you, you must have some kind of repentance because you were expecting something and you haven't gone there. So I think that maybe if you're able to get the lessons out of the trial and error that you made, you don't necessarily have to go through the repentance. But there's an evolutionary feeling of repentance that is rational. It's ingraining in yourself, in your brain, that, hey, you've done something wrong, and it's signaling you that this is painful. It's signaling that this is negative for you and you should avoid it at all costs. So repentance, I think, is a biological and evolutionary trait that is useful. But if we were 100% rational, we could avoid just having it. But we're not capable of doing that right now with our current technology.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely not. I feel like at the moment, maybe a bit of a harsh statement, but I feel like at the moment we are more on a irrational side. Completely general society, summarize, is tending to be more on a irrational side. Maybe we are exposed to different views on the world. I mean, we live in different countries. We have a different surroundings of people and everything. In my place, my surroundings, I can say that the way we are living shows that in the past, I still alive, that's why, but also my family and a lot of citizens here and past citizens have lived rationally, more rationally than unrationally, because we are living in today's standards. But I see many trends, many things that are happening right now that are more unrational, and maybe I'm more concerned that it leads to a more unrational society, or we are going to get there. Maybe it's just a concern of myself, I have to say.
Well, depends on how you define rational.
Yeah, I mean, rational in my opinion means actually living a positive life, not doing bad, like really bad things that are horrible to other people, not damaging yourself constantly without learning that you did something wrong to your body, let's say, and treating others in a good way. And I'm not saying everything is bad, absolutely not. But for example, with food, we spoke about food for a couple of minutes. You tend to see a lot of places where bad foods, like foods that more or less harm your body in the long term, actually get promoted more. I'm just concerned that
the limbic hijack.
What do you mean?
It's like going to the emotional side of your brain and hijacking that in order, like for example, Instagram with the algorithm or TikTok. It's amazingly done in order to hide your limbic system. It's precisely done in order to hijack your most monkey-like side. So you are like scrolling and addicted to it. So you have to have a rational side. The prefrontal cortex should be dictating the amygdala and saying, no, motherfucker, you should be doing your homework and doing something or doing some research for your project, or like whatever it is that you should be doing. You should be doing that and not scrolling infinitely through Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah. I think it's more of a concern that we as a society are more on the track on getting into this life where we do all kinds of sorts of unrational decisions subconsciously. I mean, I just notice it myself. I have a lot of situations where I go on Instagram and scroll. I know it's not good. I do it anyway. And millions of people are doing that as well in more extreme ways, but also many people are not doing it. I'm not saying that everything is bad and goes to bad. I'm just saying that I am concerned that we as a society will go into a trend of doing more unrational things, and we are less and less capable of getting out of that situation, because you alone don't make a big impact on when you're going on Instagram. That's not big of a deal if you do it, but the more people do it, the more power that gives to let's say the company that owns this app, and the more they are able to design it this way that we are doing it even more in another way. Let's say Instagram was a photo app. Nowadays, you can create those short videos called Reels, or you have TikTok, where it's with Reels, you're even more capable of just scrolling through. It's way easier because many people use it. They're just able to design it even more user friendly for us to make it more accessible, more convenient to use it. And I'm just concerned that we as a society are falling into this, I don't want to use the term trap, but I feel like it's the most easy one.
It is a trap.
Yeah. Well, okay. If you're agreeing with it, perfect. I'm just concerned that we as a whole society will fall more and more into this trap and are less capable of getting out of it, because there will be a point where it's nearly impossible to get out of this situation, and we are, let's say, doing irrational decisions 8 out of 10 times.
Let me do a quick book recommendation to our audience. There's a super cool book called Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. I consider him to be a guy who's got a super interesting philosophy. And he basically makes the case that social media is useless to yourself, not to you personally, but to people in general. Makes the case that our use of the digital resources is not efficient. We are tricked into biases that we could develop mechanisms to avoid. For example, I've been convinced by Cal Newport to leave social media because his arguments make sense. His philosophy completely makes sense with what I'm seeing in Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, now with the short YouTube videos. YouTube Shorts, I think it's called?
Shorts, yeah, they're
like,
called.
This thing is everywhere now. And it's not just that this thing, it's the algorithms happen in Twitter, Facebook, in everywhere. There's algorithms going against you. And then there's the hyperactive hive mind, that you are like constantly switching tasks and doing these things. So Cal Newport talks about all this. If you are interested in this, in the thing I'm talking about right now, you should check out the book Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. Perfect book for this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is only one example. With social media is just one example of it. Like, there's foods, there are many, you can name it, that people more and more don't want to give away.
Oh yeah, I did a whole podcast about this.
Really? How's it called?
It's called The Origin of All the Biases and Virtues, in which I talk about a theory I've built that that biases are basically something you fall into because you are not able to tangibly see the benefit of things and neither the cost. So you are able to see the short-term benefit but not the long-term cost, even if the long-term cost is bigger. So you end up eating fast food or having biases. So I give quite a bit of examples of how this functions. I even critique socialism. So I critique many things.
Funny example. I asked the person, I'm not going to tell a name and tell why we went into this argument, but it was about why I am not getting anything done, or I am so lazy, or I'm not getting out of this particular situation. I suggested, why don't you delete your social media or like your social media apps for a week? This is only a week, right? Nothing fancy, just as a test on how it affects you. And they absolutely denied that this person absolutely denied this option. They didn't even want to consider it and ask them, why do you don't want to do that? And they didn't give me any particular reason. And this is my concern in general with other things, also with social media, is that people are getting sucked into certain irrational things and they are not aware anymore that they should or could be off without it. They feel like they're forced to use them or use this or that in their lives in order to live forward, which is absolutely not necessary. But this is something that I am actually concerned about, and I consider that as failing to be aware of the presence you're in and your actual needs, and also your way of living in a long-term way, especially with many things that are exactly conceptualized on those things, like eating a pizza. Eating a pizza is not bad for you today. Eating a pizza every day for the rest of your life is. Using social media today isn't bad. It doesn't affect us at all, basically. But using social media for an hour or two every day is going to affect what we achieve in our lives.
Well, I think that's a fallacy. It's like in my country, there's a saying that is once a year doesn't hurt you, doesn't hurt anything. So I wouldn't necessarily agree with that saying, because once a year hurts you as much as once a year. It's like, what's the smallest amount of quantity you are able to quantify? €1? So if you spend half a euro an infinite amount of times, it doesn't add up to €1? No, let me question that. Even if you spend 0.001 cents, if you do it infinite amount of times, you get into an infinite amount. So I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, with the fact that if you do something a super small amount of time, it doesn't add to any cost. It certainly has some cost. It might have more benefits than cost, and the more you use it, the cost increases, but the benefit doesn't increase at the same rate. That's the decreasing in the marginal utility. It's an economics term. It's just saying that if you drink one glass of water, it satisfies you a lot. The next one less, you can eventually die. I think that the same thing applies to social media. You can get value if you use it for 1 minute. That doesn't mean that it doesn't affect you in any way. It certainly has a cost of 1 minute.
Yeah, sure. I think saying that it has absolutely no impact is wrong. I mean, it was maybe too extreme to say, but if you make a timeline, and on this timeline you use Instagram, let's say, once a month to DM to a business an idea, something like that, the impact is way or far less than if you use Instagram every day to just scroll through Instagram. Like, the impact is there, of course. You will use Instagram for 10 minutes. It gives that signal to the brain that you used Instagram today to DM, but it doesn't have this negative outcome that you otherwise would have if you use Instagram for every day, or if you eat a pizza every day.
But impact, by definition, is a neutral term, because there can be positive and negative impact.
Yeah, sure.
You might mean that by using it 1 minute a month, or for the DM for the company, I think that what you mean and how you should have phrased it is that the cost is lower than the benefit, so that transaction is justified.
Oh, yeah. That would be probably a better explanation, definitely. Yeah, it's just like, how do you use your time or your energy, or what do you do with it, or how do you act, and how do you fail to use your time or use your energy or that food instead of this? Like, for me, it's just, what is the cost of using Instagram for this amount of time, and what is the cost of actually being productive? What is the actual outcome of those both scenarios? And I kind of match them and see where I'm at. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you can certainly improve your life, and that
always, yeah.
You can certainly mess it up.
Definitely, yeah. And I think the whole point of it is, do you fail to actually improve, to take it in your own hands, or do you succeed in doing or taking your life in your own hands and being in charge and leading yourself in a positive way? I think that's, what do you count as successful is absolutely up to you. Of course, it's also a bit defined by society. Having a degree is considered by most of people as really good, while extreme example, being homeless is not very good by society. How do you, it's maybe a personal question, maybe you don't know the answer yet, but completely society aside, what do you consider yourself, or what is success to you in your terms? If you know the answer, you don't have to necessarily know it, because you're, like me, really young.
Well, in order to define something as being successful, I think that the meaning of life should enter the question. And I'm not sure about what the meaning of life is. Let's say there's a meaning of life in life. So if you satisfy that meaning and you exploit it, maybe not exploit it, but you achieve it, or you have it, you have the maximum amount of meaning possible in life, I would consider that to be successful. Or, like, for example, if you've got an objective and you fulfill it, I would consider that to be successful, but only in relation to that objective. Maybe that objective in the absolute terms of life is irrelevant, so I wouldn't consider that to be successful in absolute terms. But in absolute terms, what is considered to be successful would depend 100% on what we consider to be meaningful in life.
Yeah.
And I don't have a response for that.
Yeah, sure. I understand, because of course, I don't want to be 70 and unhappy. Then I would be unsuccessful in my terms. But there are many things I didn't find out yet that are...
Do you think that life should be a constant trying to reduce the regret of when we are 80 and we look back? So trying to predict what we will be regretting when we're 80 and looking back and incapable to doing anything else. Should we live a life in order to reduce maximally the amount of regret we will have when we're 80?
No.
Why not?
I'm not saying you should absolutely avoid everything and then regret everything. Absolutely not. But you have to decide for yourself, what are things that I can try now that are basically impossible later? And you can prioritize things. Let's say you prioritize a healthy, stable relationship or a family. Let's say you absolutely want a family. Let's say you go for the absolute standard family constructions, one male, one female, probably 2 kids, 1 or 2 kids would be a basic construct of a family. You want to have that, and you're able to follow this objective over a considerably large amount of time. I mean, if you're 20, if you're 30, if you're 40, you're always or more likely to achieve that. Time is not running out. And if
really?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not able to find a good mate at 20, you get the chance at 30. Of course, the options or the possibilities or the opportunities are fewer and fewer over time, but there's still the possibility. And I think targeting that objective, and let's say you're just not able to fulfill this objective. Let's say you move constantly forward, you just not find that, let's say, that mate, or you're just not able to create this family construct that you have in your head. And when you're 80, you're like, damn, I didn't achieve that. I wouldn't consider that as a regret, but I would regret not, let's say, getting a fitness coach degree when I was 20, because I know that getting a fitness coach degree or something like that is, let's say, practically impossible at 50. I mean, you're still able to get it, but what does it help to be a coach at 50? And it's a bit harsh to say, but not being able to move really good anymore. This may be too harsh, but I would regret not doing the things I was capable of doing at that exact moment more fulfillingly than just trying something over a longer period of time. Like, I could, try and live a healthy life over till I'm 80. If I'm there and I wasn't able to live completely healthy life till 80, then the regret is not as high as not reaching for that risky step at 20 that I wasn't able to do at 30 anymore, let's say. And if we just constantly try to eliminate regrets that we may have at 80, we are getting sucked away by things that we not actually want in the future.
If you discount that, you would leverage your capabilities in every moment. Like, for example, with 20, you are young, you are strong, you're agile. With 40, you might have some more money, you're able to do bigger investments. You've got a family maybe built. So you've got to use the tools you've got in every age. You've got different resources in every age. So taking into account that those are different in every age and you have to adapt to every single situation, you might want to adapt to it whenever you are trying to use the strategy of minimizing regret whenever looking back when you are 80.
But I feel like there's a potential chance of, I think this can also be considered as that regret can become a habit. And I feel like that this habit of regret can be considered as a bad habit, because if you're constantly trying to eliminate the thought of regret. So let's say if you always regret going for a pizza instead of a salad, let's say, we make this very simple example, I will translate it to many other areas of life. If I wake up 5 minutes late, I will regret at getting up at 6 because then I'm in a hurry. If you're constantly creating this habit of regret, your emotions of regret will become bigger and bigger over time. And I think it builds this pressure of yourself not wanting to regret anything, which is not possible. I regret things and I'm fine with it. I regret not many things because I thought about them and like were able to tell how much did they affect me. I thought them through. But if you're constantly running through life and trying to not regret, it becomes this habit that later on is so strong because you're only looking back. When you're old, of course you're still looking forward, but you know what I'm saying? Like you look back at life more and more because you experience more that you had then rather than what you will experience. So you look back, and if you always regretted little things, it becomes this big thing, and you're saying, I didn't regret doing this and that and that. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, the proportion of what you've lived to what you will live is constantly increasing. That will increase until the day you die, and that will be infinite. You will have lived everything, and you will have left nothing. And when you were just born, you had everything to live left. So as that's going to increase with time, I think that we're more predisposed to look backwards and think about the past than we used to do previously. When I was 5, I didn't care about previous experiences.
Exactly.
But now, I mostly think about previous experiences. And I'm not that old.
Exactly. I assume you do regret some things in your life. I mean...
Depends on how do you find the regret.
For me, regret is looking back and being able to notice that I really, really would have done this or that differently. I think if you wish for it, then it's a full regret. But I think did you ever really wish that things were different in your past?
Well, yeah, I wish I didn't fail that year when I was 13. For example, one of many things I failed in life. But I don't know if things would be the same way. Like, let's say I'm now in this situation. And if I changed that inefficiency back then, like 7 years ago, would I be here? Or I might have died.
You wouldn't be further in life, you would be at another point. You wouldn't be necessarily at a higher level, you would be at a different...
But I don't care about being in a different point.
Yeah,
I just care about being in a better point.
Yeah, sure. No, but I think that's the tricky thing about regret. I also don't care. I think I'm at a very good position right now. If I would change things back in time or wish things were different, I would be in another situation. But I don't know if that really is the thought of regret. The definition of regret is really hard for me. I think for me, regret would be wishing things were different without taking into account that changing things in the past would change things in the present right now. I think that's the logical side of it.
Do you want to hear my definition of regret?
You can, yeah, tell me.
I would define regret as a realization of a bad investment. You've noticed that you've invested in something in any way, in time, emotions, money, in any resource you might have had in the past, and you've realized that the alternative would have been better. That's, I think, the definition of regret. But I don't know that the alternative would have been better. Statistically, sure, it would have been, on average, I guess. Because it would have been objectively better to not fail that year than it was failing it. But I'm not able to predict how every single situation in my life would have been developed in case I changed something 7 years ago. So if I was just able to modify something 7 years ago without knowing the outcome, I wouldn't change it. I would just leave it like that. I'm not willing to accept that uncertainty of not knowing what's going to change.
I really understand this side of yours. I think you're thinking from a very logical, rational side. Yeah, I think what you said is absolutely true. I agree with it. I'm just like trying to separate. Wishing things were different is the irrational side, not the factual side, and the side of knowing that things would be different, like it would be not the same as it is now, and the way it is now is okay. This is how life goes. This is for me, a more rational side, in my view. Now, I think regret also has something to do with thinking rationally, knowing that everything that you're 80 and knowing that everything you did was just the way you acted, the way the world acted, let's say, I think is a rational side, because you know that you can't change anything and it's just the way it is, and the way it is actually fine. And being 80 and looking back, or it depends what age you want to name it, but we agreed that 80 is a more looking back age than age of 5, let's say. And so being 80 and wishing that I would have done this or that is kind of a irrational thing, because you're completely forgetting the logical side that things would be absolutely different. And if you're alive at that point, it basically tells that the things turned out to be okay, in my opinion. I mean, if you live till 80, let's say, life went pretty okay.
In evolutionary terms.
Yeah, in evolutionary terms, yeah. I mean, career-wise, that's up for you to decide, but for me, if I'm able to live till 80 and am considerably happy, maybe was or still am married, and lived a career where I was able to sustain myself or my family, I would probably, I mean, I can't tell, would have no regrets, because I'm in a situation where I literally can't complain. From my view, I mean, this view is different. It has a lot to do with expectations, don't you think?
Depends on. I'm sorry for constantly saying the same thing, but
no, of course,
I think it depends on how you define the capacity to complain. When do you gain that? When is a complaint justified? Is it justified ever?
I mean, oh man, this is a big question.
Yeah, it is.
It really is. Caught me off guard. I feel like 99% of all complaints are not justified.
How do you justify that statement?
Which one? The ones I just...
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, I didn't learn it the hard way. Maybe I will someday, but I still complain a lot. I know that. But I know that most of our complaints are just our inabilities to work on ourselves. Like, you might complain that you don't like that person. It's completely not justified. This is your personal opinion. If you don't like this person, then just don't be in interaction with this person. Name me a complaint which could be justified, where you absolutely have no control and you're absolutely in the baddest spot possible without any control. I think you can't give me any situation where I'm able to complain and literally can't do anything about it and only bad things happen to me.
I think I can.
You can?
Yeah. Even like a complaint would be useful in case you are signaling to your surroundings that there's something to be improved. That's basically a complaint. In case you weren't able to change anything.
But it's how you state that complaint.
No. I'm saying a complaint is always justified in case you are signaling to your surroundings or to the people around you that there's something to be changed, and that thing will lead to a change and an improvement in the system in general, in the long term. In those cases in which you are signaling the wrongdoing of something, that's justified. But in the case you weren't capable to change anything at all, if you've got some kind of bad being psychologically, which is not rational, it's just evolutionary inefficiency, and one way to get rid of it is by complaining, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's not justified. I think that that's actually justified. You are dealing with an inefficiency in the evolutionary process. what am I supposed to do? To be absolutely rational and say, oh, from now on, I'm just going to do the most rational thing possible. I'm just going to go to the gym, read books, stop consuming any kind of drugs, quit social media. Like living a perfect life, it's impossible.
No,
so
it's not. I know that.
If living a perfect life is impossible, and we know that we're living with inefficiencies, with biological inefficiencies, why satisfying one of those biological drives that we have, which is the one to complain sometimes, even if it doesn't have any practical application, not justified if you are going through such a bad mental situation, and that might help you?
Sure. No, complaining alone is not the thing that I'm like mentioning. If you're going, let's say, through a really bad time, and complaining helps. What I mean is, if you're in a bad situation and you're complaining, but this complaining really just doesn't do anything, like maybe it helps your psychological ways, but if you're just complaining but not even trying to take action into making things better, then I feel like, I think my explanation before was a bit undefined. I feel like complaining is justified if you are trying to take action to get out of that situation you're complaining about. If you're complaining about the situation but not even trying to take any action out of it, or to get out of it, then I feel like it's unjustified. Do you agree with me? Or
if the fact of complaining is everything you can do in order to solve the problem, let's say I complain about something I don't have any way to impact it. The election system in the US, it's biased towards the bipartisan system. That's something which is objectively correct. I would like to change that in order to permit third parties to work there, to do something. Am I able to modify that? Well, I might be. I can move to the US. I can start a political campaign in order to change that. I might have success, but I can have some impact. But I consider some other things in my life to be more relevant than that, though. I don't have any impact there because I prefer to use my resources somewhere else, so I don't have any spare resources to invest in there. The only amount of resources I'm willing to invest in that project is the words I'm saying right now. I think that this thing is inefficient, and I think this thing should be improved in this way. Why, if I'm not willing to invest any resources in that problem, even if I consider that problem to exist and to be not optimal, why am I not justified to signal that I think that there's something to be repaired there in order to try make someone else take action? Because I'm not going to do it because I prefer doing something else.
Well, it depends. Does it really affect your life negatively, like really negatively?
It does.
Okay.
Well, it depends on how you define intensity, or what level of intensity you ascribe to the impact that suboptimal economical system in the US affects me. It affects me, certainly. If it wasn't from the US, you and I would be much poorer. If it wasn't from the US, I don't know if the Axis would have won.
Yes.
So I've got no idea what will happen in that case. So I think that we're influenced by how things go in the United States, for example, also in Canada, in Mexico, in every place. The world is globalized. We're affected by everything. And the US being like 20% of the global GDP, it's definitely impacting us. It's not 20% of the inventions. It's overrepresented. The US is a huge place of inventions and creativity. So I think that, for example, we're recording through a Squadcast. This is created by a US company. We use phones that are from Apple or whatever. Like we use products. We're super influenced by the US. So improving the systems that they are, the economical system that they have and the political system definitely impacts me.
Mm-hmm. Of course, our resources that we are using right now, like let's say Squawcast, allows us to communicate in this way, and we don't know if the war ended differently if it weren't for the US, or the scenarios. Are you affected by the situation right now so much that you can't live your life? For me, it's you're able to complain if you're in a situation where you can't do anything and you're literally not able to live your life.
Okay, I think I got your point. Let me try explain what I think you mean.
Sure.
Whenever you are complaining and you're trying to satisfy your genetic predisposition to complain, if you are doing that too much, you are just falling into a vice. You're just falling into something that's actually not adding value to your life. You are doing it a lot and you are not getting a reward for it. And you, by falling into a vice, for example, social media might be one, every single thing that might be inefficient in your life, that you are predisposed to falling into it, is a vice. So you, by complaining too much, by utilizing your resources in order to complain and not acting, whenever you've already complained enough to send your message in a reasonable amount, you should invest the rest of your resources in other things. So you, by not doing that, are being suboptimal, and so your critique, I think, is justified. You are saying if you keep complaining, you are being useless. You are not adding value to your life. Why? Because you've already done the small unit of complaint that was useful for you, or maybe no unit was the optimal amount. I'm not saying that there's always an amount. I'm saying that sometimes there's an amount that's optimal. So whenever you've already done that, if it exists, you are just doing suboptimal allocation of resources. So you should be doing something else and maybe taking actions.
Yeah, absolutely. You brought it right up to the point. That was a really good explanation of what I was trying to point out. It is kind of a controversial topic for some people because they are actually not aware that they are complaining that much, and they may feel like that my point of view is intense, and I'm sure you complain as well. Yes, I do complain, and I know that it isn't justified, but at least I am aware of that I am complaining, and that 100% probably is not justified. I can honestly, every time I complain, it is absolutely not justified because the way I'm living is way above global standards. Generally, if you live in Switzerland, you live above average. I think that's a correct statement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the GDP per capita in the world is like $10,000, maybe $5,000, and the GDP per capita in Switzerland is like $85,000.
Exactly.
So it's among the top 5 countries with the highest GDP per capita. You're absolutely right.
And that's just only the income, but also the quality of livings and everything. Like, that's why I'm saying that 100% of all my complaints, career, personal, anything, is not justified. Still, I'm doing it because I'm not perfect.
But you're comparing yourself with people alive right now.
Yes, I am comparing myself to others. This all comes to me not being perfect and not being able to being on this rational perfect side as I should be. If I would, then I would have achieved more in my personal life. Like, I know that I check, for example, Instagram a lot. I'm aware of that. I'm just at that present moment, I'm not being able to find a proper solution that helps me in the long run. I'm able to go off Instagram for a day, but I know that I'm not being able to go off it forever, or let's say 7 days. And this might be, let's say, crazy for you to hear because you were able to delete it.
It was hard.
Exactly. It is hard. And for me, at the moment, I feel like it's impossible because I'm using that platform to build my portfolio. What I'm saying is, I know that many things I do are not maybe the way I talk about them. Let's say you shouldn't complain. I know I complain, still I do it. But I'm aware of the situation, at least. I'm trying to improve myself in some form. And I think in some shape or form, everyone should be trying to do that as well in certain areas of their lives. I'm not saying in those kind of areas specifically, whatever helps you, but find a point in your life that maybe holds you back, is uncomfortable, or anything you want to change, and try to be aware of the situation and approach it. It doesn't have to go fast, but make a progress.
I haven't understood one thing. So you, by living in Switzerland and having a high living standard, have lost the capability or the moral capacity to complain? Is a person in the Congo who's low in terms of relative living standards of people living right now, does that person have the moral capacity to complain? Because he's below average in global terms in people living right now?
Well, what do you think?
I think I see no reason why we should only consider people living right now. And if you cannot complain because you are living in a country that is above average in people living right now, I don't think why people that are already dead, that are like, I don't know what's the exact amount, could be 50 billion people, but I think it's 100 billion people. So there's like probably 10% of the total human population in the earth living right now. Yeah, I think it's 100 billion people, the total amount of humans that have existed ever. So even the person from the Congo that I've just mentioned that might be super low in relative terms with people living now is above average on absolute terms. If you take all the humans and if you took all the animals, he would be in the top 1%.
Yeah, but I think you have to like kind of narrow it down to the present you're at. If you literally take everything into account, even the past that not even exists anymore, it's way out of this. Completely is way too much to consider.
Why?
Well,
brain limitations?
Maybe. No, but I feel like discussing if he's justified to complain and taking every human being into account and everything, and let him with those facts be in the 1%. I mean, you can, obviously, then we were able to tell that nearly everyone isn't justified to complain, but...
No. My question was, are you not able to complain morally because of your superior than average situation in life standards? Is that the thing taking your moral capability to complain? That's the question.
I really have to think about it because it's a hard question. And for me, as being at this point and comparing to the person in
the
Congo, yeah, it's hard to... I'm really struggling with that. Yeah, you made yourself a good question there.
Okay, let's say you don't have to give me a response to be able to get value from this conclusion.
I'll try.
Well, okay, you will try, but let me just say something. The thing that we're certain about is that you are now not sure about the fact that you are not morally equipped with the capacity to complain. You are not sure about that. Or you are not sure about the fact that you, by being up in the hierarchy of well-being in the current society, takes your capacity to complain. And you just stated, like 5 minutes ago, that you shouldn't be complaining because of that. So you, by analyzing with more precision your statements, have realized that, hey, I'm not sure about this. I'm not so sure as I used to think about this. It's not a fault from you. Like, I certainly have the same thing, and if I analyze my own statements, the same thing would happen, and with many of them. But I'm just saying that the thing we know right now is that you are not sure about your statement.
I am. And
are you?
I am unsure, yeah. The reason why is the fact that I'm aware of me not knowing... I barely know anything if I consider everything. And this is just my opinion right now. And this is my view to my life of how I lived it in the past 20 years, how I remember it in the last 7, completely. And this is just an answer I did not analyze in detail. It's just more of my past experiences and what I found to be useful in my life that led me to this point here. So the reason I'm not necessarily unsure, I like to reevaluate how I lived my life and how I can adapt and also improve and learn. Maybe till now, my strong opinion was for the past 2 years that complaining isn't justified, but how does it translate to others? And how do I give an answer to your question, for example, about justification of complaining to a person in a below average country, when I don't really have the answer because I only lived it that way for 2 years and it worked for my circumstances. My circumstances are way, way different than, let's say, the person in Congo. Also, the experiences are different. It's so wide apart, those two scenarios, that I'm unsure to answer, because at the proper moment, it is very hard to give a proper answer without taking into account what is different and what are just my beliefs, and maybe not be their beliefs or others' beliefs. Maybe you know what I'm saying here. It's kind of hard to explain actually for me.
I think you've realized more than you did previously, the huge ignorance that you have.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I think the same thing applies to me, definitely. And I think I'm relatively aware of how hugely or enormously ignorant I am. And I think that the more I learn and the more mature I become, the more aware I will be of the enormity of my ignorance.
The thing is, when you grow up the way you do, you're kind of not taught, but you're kind of automatically adapting the behaviors of others. Definitely. And by going through life, the longer you go, the more you learn, the more you realize other circumstances, and that maybe your point of view maybe not adapt to others. The thing is, I think I was aware enough to say that I'm unsure to give an answer because I only lived it in my circumstances, and this huge ignorance of only lived in this environment doesn't let me give you a proper answer on those other terms, which is kind of hard to give. If I would just said anything like, yes, he's allowed to complain, or they're allowed to complain, or they're not, this would be just my ignorant statement of thinking what I believe, which is not everything. It's just mine.
But you've got some knowledge. You've got knowledge over your lack of knowledge in order to say that you shouldn't make a judgment over something that you're aware of your non-awareness.
Exactly, yeah. Complicated sentence, but it makes sense, yeah.
You still know something.
Exactly.
We couldn't say that you are absolutely ignorant. You know something. That's valuable.
Yes, definitely. Yes, this is valuable, but just a general question. Is this ignorance, is it a really bad thing? Maybe I'm not aware of it. I'm asking you this question just to learn. Is it a bad thing?
In case this is my intuition. In case we had an objective and we try to maximize it, knowing more would give us a hedge against failing. So it would make us more prone to succeed in whatever is our objective. So yeah, not knowing is bad and knowing is good. But we could also argue that there's bad knowledge and good knowledge. If you know how to build an atomic bomb, I could argue that you shouldn't have the knowledge, because if individual people had it, a global catastrophic crisis would appear. So I'm not necessarily sure about my statement. My intuition tells me that the more knowledge you have, the more tools you have to confront your future uncertainty. But I'm also aware that there's negative knowledge you could also have. So in order to give a response to this question, I should assume as a dogma that there's some kind of moral standard, like let's say human flourishing. Human, and we could add animals too. Like let's say we're against animal mistreatment. Okay, we could add animals and plants and whatever is aware or conscious. We could add every conscious being into the equation and make the flourishing of those being the moral standard. The more that happens, the best. Okay, so assuming that as dogma, which I don't have anything solid to sustain it, I would say that, yeah, knowing more would lead to a bigger capacity to maximize that moral standard that I've just mentioned. But I'm not sure if that moral standard is the proper way or if there should be one. I'm not 100% sure about that either.
Yeah, the thing is, for me, the statement of yours was the way you told me that it kind of stated my ignorance. I know that ignorance can be understood in different ways. And I know that having that kind of ignorance, but still being aware of it, but also being able to change it over time helps me to improve myself. But there's also this really bad ignorance also arrogance and selfishness, that everything you believe is true or experience is the right way, leads to a complete false way of living. Like if you say to yourself that everything I believe is correct and say is right and should be done this way.
I don't agree with that.
No.
If you know certainly that whatever you think as a dogma that you are right is incorrect, you know something. If that statement that assuming whatever you are assuming is incorrect is correct, you know that there's something in the universe that is incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
So if that thing is incorrect, doing the opposite, if you can invert it, like you put a minus in the start of the equation, I think that if you do that, you will be able to achieve maximum truth. But it is also true that your knowledge, the thing you are assuming to be true dogmatically and with selfishness, is only like 0.00 O's and then 1% of the total knowledge possible. And I don't know if it would be any relevant amount in terms of in comparison to infinity, but never mind. Whatever. That is super small percentage that you know. If you invert it, you will still have only 0.01% of the knowledge in positive way. So even inverting a negative knowledge or a non-applicable to the reality knowledge or a false knowledge wouldn't give you the truth. But this, for example, happens in finance. If you systematically know that a hedge fund is going to lose money, that's the best possible thing that they could tell you to win money. You just invest against that and you are guaranteed to win money. I think that the correct statement would be, whatever I assume as a dogma to be correct doesn't necessarily have to have any correlation with reality.
Sure.
Neither positive, neither negative. It's just independent. It's random stuff. It's neither negative, neither positive. It's just incorrect, but by being incorrect, it doesn't have any correlation. The most incorrect you can get is by having zero correlation with reality.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of making a conclusion to this statement of being justified to complain, because I feel like we just talked about this whole topic basically. Giving my opinion to say if it is justified or unjustified for that person in Congo to complain about this or that situation would be ignorant and also not false, but would be unconsiderable. If you do not agree, feel free to say, but it just is...
We could go forever.
Yeah, we could.
Because I could rephrase the phrase I just told previously and say, how do you know that? What are you sustaining this with? And then whatever you say, I would say, what are you sustaining that thing with? And then we go to the root and we see that there's not absolute, rational, solid meaning in life. So I don't have a response to that.
Sure.
So everything goes to that. To the lack of objective, true, solid meaning.
Yeah, but I think what we can both agree on is that our personal views are not translated to other circumstances. And if it has to be that way in that scenario, this is just how you lived your life, what circumstances you were confronted with, but you have absolutely no clue how it is different to this life of that person.
Yeah, but that's bidirectional. The same way you say that I cannot make a judgment of how a person in the Congo is living because I'm unaware of how that life is, I can say the same thing about him over me. So it's not that he's superior to me for living a worse life or a worse in economic terms. He might be super happy or even happier than me. Yeah. That's perfectly possible.
Yes.
But in economic terms, he's worse off than I am. So that's not positioning him up or down. That's just that I'm maladapted to judge his position. The same way he is maladapted to judge my position. So it's just like putting a zebra to dive with the dolphins. It's not adapted to that situation. It hasn't developed in that environment. So you should put things in the place they are developed to work.
Yeah, I definitely agree on this part. That makes a lot of sense. That was a very interesting subtopic that we kind of drifted off to.
Yeah, I agree.
Wow.
Should we wrap it up?
To summarize, to give a conclusion to the main question on what is failure in general, is the lack of self-awareness to improve, to see yourself in a place where you cannot learn anything, in order to succeed, you need to be self-aware. You need to be in an open place where you can go into different, or allowed to go into different directions. And failure basically is the assumption that you can stay in the place you are and you will go with it perfectly fine forever. I'm just trying to summarize for the listeners, because we talked a lot. I'm sure if people were listening for 2 hours and 50 minutes, they had the initial statement in the beginning, but
let's say a random word so people can comment down on the comments of YouTube.
yes.
If they get here, we'll appreciate the person who says platypus, let's say.
Yes, let's make something that really... What should we let them know? You proposed something. It was your idea.
Platypus, that's a random word. If someone comments platypus in the comments, that would be amazing.
That summarizes it perfectly. But just in conclusion, really, I would just, for myself, I learned a lot during this talk, obviously.
Same.
And I just realized that failure is so much more than we think, but also can be really minimized down if you think rationally and go by rational thinking, by factual thinking, but still not being perfect, but being aware that you're not perfect and changing different areas and not being too hard on yourself. Many definitions, but I feel like you can also make your own definition. We had our definition for the last 3 hours. Yeah, but I think we wrap it up. It has been absolutely lovely to talk to you, and I hope that you enjoyed it as well, of course. We managed everything in a fair good way. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. To all listeners from Alex's side and my side, of course, I really hope that. I'm looking forward to seeing this out and also having a positive feedback. We would really appreciate it. Again, it was really nice talking to you. Looking forward to future talk probably as well again. So yeah, have a nice evening, or whenever you're listening it too. And yeah, thank you for listening, and yeah, see you guys. Peace.